Two men who once called each other brother stood on opposite sides of a battlefield, and when the fighting stopped, 50,000 Romans lay dead in the mud. Today, I'm revealing the true story behind Caesar versus Pompey, the great Roman civil war that historians call the bloodiest betrayal in ancient history. Most people think this war started because of ambition or politics. They're completely wrong, because historians recently discovered letters proving this war started because of a dead woman, and a broken promise made at a dinner party that spiraled into the collapse of a 500-year-old civilization. Stay until the end, because what really happened at the Battle of Pharsalus will completely change how you see power, friendship, and betrayal. And before we go any further, if you're tired of history videos that feel like boring textbooks, destroy that like button right now, because this story is about to get intense. Let me paint you a picture. It's 60 BC. Rome controls everything from Spain to Syria, 3 continents, 50 million people, the ancient world's only superpower. But here's what your history teacher never told you. Rome was 3 years away from complete collapse. Not from external enemies, not from barbarian invasions, from itself. For 50 years, Roman politicians had been hiring gangs to murder each other in broad daylight. Actual armies had marched into the capital. Brothers had killed brothers in the streets. The Senate, supposedly the wisest men in Rome, had become a den of corruption where the richest 1% controlled everything while 90% of citizens struggled to survive. Sound familiar? Into this chaos stepped 3 men who made a secret deal that would change history forever. Their names: Marcus Licinius Crassus, Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, Gaius Julius Caesar. Crassus was the richest human being on planet Earth, worth roughly $2 trillion in today's money. He literally owned Rome's fire department and would negotiate prices while your house burned. Pompey was the ultimate military hero, had conquered more territory than anyone since Alexander the Great. Soldiers worshipped him, the Senate feared him. He had personally brought 100 million denarii into Rome's treasury. And Caesar, the youngest of the 3, 40 years old, drowning in debt, brilliant speaker, master politician. But here's what made him dangerous: he understood regular people in a way the other 2 never could. These 3 made a pact, a secret alliance. Historians call it the first triumvirate. Think of it like this: imagine if Jeff Bezos, a 5-star general, and the most popular politician in America secretly agreed to run the country together behind everyone's backs. That's what happened. But here's where it gets insane. To seal this alliance, Caesar did something brilliant. He married his 23-year-old daughter Julia to Pompey, who was 47 years old and had been married 4 times already. Everyone expected this to be a political arrangement. Cold, transactional, but ancient historians recorded something nobody predicted. Pompey fell in love with her. Roman writer Plutarch documented that Pompey, this hardened military commander who had executed thousands, would leave Senate meetings early just to spend time with Julia. He bought her gardens, wrote her poetry, completely ignored his political duties. Senators started mocking him, saying he'd become soft and weak. And Julia, she loved him back. Letters between them survive to this day showing genuine affection. This wasn't just politics anymore. This was family, which makes what happens next even more devastating. While Pompey was falling in love in Rome, Caesar got exactly what he wanted: the governorship of Gaul, modern-day France, Belgium, and parts of Germany and Switzerland. But not for 1 year like normal, for 10 years. And not with 1 legion, with 4 legions, 20,000 professional killers. Here's why this matters. In Roman politics, governing a province meant you could become obscenely wealthy from taxes and plunder, and you could build an army that was personally loyal to you. For the next 8 years, Caesar did something no Roman had ever done before. He conquered 3 million square miles of territory. He fought the Germanic tribes and won. He invaded Britain twice, becoming the first Roman to cross the English Channel. He defeated over 300 Gallic tribes. He sold over 1 million people into slavery and killed another million in battle. His personal wealth went from massive debt to roughly $5 billion in today's money. And his army grew from 4 legions to 10 legions, 50,000 battle-hardened veterans who had conquered an entire continent together. These men didn't serve Rome, they served Caesar. And back in Rome, everyone started noticing. Imagine being Pompey. For 20 years, you've been Rome's greatest general. You've conquered the East, defeated pirates, reorganized the entire Mediterranean. You're called Pompey the Great. And now people are talking about Caesar's victories, Caesar's wealth, Caesar's popularity. Ancient letters from this period, recently translated, reveal something shocking. Pompey started lying about his own accomplishments, exaggerating numbers, claiming victories he didn't actually win. Why? Because he was terrified of being overshadowed. One senator recorded, "Pompey cannot bear an equal, and Caesar cannot bear a superior." And then tragedy struck that would shatter everything. 54 BC. Julia, Caesar's daughter, Pompey's wife, the bond holding these two men together, died in childbirth. She was 28 years old. Plutarch recorded that when Pompey heard the news, he collapsed, refused to eat for days, locked himself in his villa. Caesar, fighting in Gaul, couldn't even attend the funeral. The personal connection was severed. But it gets worse. Caesar offered Pompey his grandniece Octavia to marry, trying to rebuild the family bond. Pompey refused. Instead, he married Cornelia, the daughter of one of Caesar's biggest enemies in the Senate. That wasn't just a marriage. That was a declaration. Then Crassus, the third man, the GLUE holding this alliance together with his money and influence, decided he was tired of being overshadowed. He wanted military glory like Caesar and Pompey. So he launched an invasion of Parthia, the great empire to the east, modern-day Iran. It was a catastrophe. At the Battle of Carrhae, the Parthians surrounded Crassus's army in the desert. They shot arrows until the Romans ran out of shields. Then they charged. 20,000 Romans died. Crassus himself was captured. According to legend, the Parthians poured molten gold down his throat, mocking his famous wealth. Now it was just Caesar and Pompey, two alpha males. Only one could be number one. And the Senate was about to make a fatal mistake. The Senate, especially a hardcore politician named Cato, started panicking. They looked at Caesar in Gaul with 10 legions and millions in gold, and they saw a threat. What if Caesar marched on Rome like previous warlords? What if he made himself king? They needed protection. They turned to Pompey. And here's the genius political trap they set. They told Pompey, "You're Rome's defender. We're making you sole consul, unlimited power to protect the republic." This had never happened before. It was basically making Pompey a legal dictator. But then they said, "And Caesar, his governorship is over. He needs to disband his army and come home now." Caesar said, "Actually, my term isn't over for 2 more years." But here's what everyone knew: whoever gave up their army first would be destroyed. If Caesar disbanded his legions and came back as a private citizen, Cato and his allies would put him on trial for crimes he committed as governor, like starting unauthorized wars, executing tribal leaders without Senate approval, crossing into Germany. The punishment: exile or execution. If Pompey gave up his command first, Caesar could do whatever he wanted. Here's what your history books don't tell you: Caesar tried to compromise. Repeatedly. Ancient historians recorded 9 different offers Caesar made. "Let me keep 2 legions and 1 province until I can run for consul." Rejected. 1 legion and 1 province. Rejected. Just immunity from prosecution until the elections. Rejected. Why? Because Cato and his faction didn't want compromise. They wanted Caesar destroyed, humiliated, broken, gone. Drop your answer in the comments. Do you think the Senate was right to be afraid of Caesar, or did they create the monster they feared by refusing to negotiate? January 7, 49 BC, the Senate passed the Senatus Consultum Ultimum, the final act. This was like declaring martial law. It suspended all normal laws and gave unlimited power to the consuls to protect the republic by any means necessary. And those consuls immediately gave all that power to Pompey. Caesar's allies in the Senate, including a young politician named Mark Antony, tried to veto this. They were overruled and told to leave or be arrested. That night, they fled Rome in disguise and raced to Caesar's camp in Gaul. The Senate had just declared Caesar an enemy of the state. The punishment for enemies of the state: death. 3 days later, Caesar stood at a river that would change human history forever. January 10, 49 BC, a small river called the Rubicon marked the border between Caesar's province of Gaul and Italy proper. Roman law was crystal clear: any general who crossed this border with an army was committing treason, punishable by death. Caesar stood there with the 13th Legion, 5,000 men, and a choice: cross the river, start a civil war that would kill hundreds of thousands, and potentially destroy the republic he claimed to serve, or disband his army, face trial, and almost certainly be executed. Ancient historians recorded that Caesar stood there for hours. His officers were silent, waiting. Finally, according to the historian Suetonius, Caesar said, "Alia iacta est, the die is cast. Like rolling dice, you can't take it back." Then he crossed. Every single man in that legion knew what this meant. They were now traitors. If they lost, they would all be executed. But they followed him anyway. Why? Because Caesar had spent 8 years fighting beside them, sharing their meals, sleeping in their camps, leading charges personally, getting wounded in battle. These men would follow Caesar into hell. What happened next shocked Rome and changed warfare forever. Caesar didn't have his full army, just 1 legion against Pompey's 7 legions in Italy. Everyone expected Caesar to wait for reinforcements. Instead, he did something insane. He sprinted down the Italian peninsula, capturing city after city before anyone could react. Ariminum, captured in 1 day. Pisorum, surrendered without a fight. Ancona, gates opened by Caesar's supporters inside. side. In 2 weeks, Caesar controlled all of northern Italy. Pompey was in shock. How was Caesar moving so fast? Then came the moment that terrified Pompey. At a town called Corfinium, one of Pompey's generals, Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus, tried to make a stand with 15,000 men. Caesar surrounded the town. Inside, Domitius's own soldiers mutinied. They arrested their general and opened the gates. Caesar could have executed 15,000 enemy soldiers. He could have sold them into slavery and made millions. Instead, he did something no Roman general had ever done. He let them all go free. All 15,000 men, including their general. He gave them money for the journey home and said, "This war isn't against Rome. It's against the corrupt Senate. You're free to go." This was genius propaganda. Word spread like wildfire across Italy. Caesar shows mercy. Caesar is reasonable. Caesar isn't the monster the Senate claims. Cities started opening their gates voluntarily. Soldiers started joining Caesar instead of fighting him. And Pompey, he made a decision that shocked everyone. He abandoned Rome. The Senate, the consuls, the treasury, everything. They evacuated south and sailed to Greece. Caesar marched into Rome on March 17, 49 BC. No battle, no bloodshed, just walked in. But here's what's crazy. He immediately went to the Senate, the few senators who stayed, and gave a speech. He said, "I don't want to be a tyrant. I want to restore the republic. The Senate can keep its power. I just want legal protection from false prosecution." Then he left Rome after just 11 days. Why? Because Pompey still had 7 legions in Spain, and if those legions marched east while Pompey attacked from Greece, Caesar would be trapped. So Caesar did the unexpected. Instead of chasing Pompey to Greece, he marched west to Spain to destroy those legions first. The Spanish campaign was absolutely brilliant, and it's where Caesar proved he was more than just lucky. In Spain, Pompey's commanders had more soldiers than Caesar and better defensive positions. For 40 days, both armies maneuvered without a major battle. Caesar used a tactic historians call strategic exhaustion. He cut off their water supplies using engineering. He outflanked them using speed. He captured their supply routes using cavalry. He never gave them the set-piece battle they wanted. After 6 weeks, Pompey's entire Spanish army, 30,000 men, just surrendered. Not one major battle, barely any casualties. Caesar had defeated an entire army through logistics and maneuver. And once again, he let them all go home. But there was a price. While Caesar was in Spain, his best friend, a general named Curio, took 2 legions to invade North Africa. Curio was ambushed by a Numidian king allied with Pompey. Both legions were destroyed, 4,000 men dead. Curio died fighting. When Caesar heard the news, ancient sources say he wept openly. This wasn't a game. Every campaign cost real lives, real families destroyed. Before we continue to the epic conclusion, I need you to do something. Smash that subscribe button right now if you want to see how this story ends. Because the Battle of Pharsalus is one of the most important battles in all of human history, and if you're not subscribed, you'll miss it. Also, drop a comment. Are you Team Caesar or Team Pompey? Who do you think was in the right here? Because this isn't black and white, and I genuinely want to know what you think. Early 48 BC, Caesar was ready to finish this. He had to cross the Adriatic Sea to Greece where Pompey was gathering a massive army. Problem: Pompey controlled the sea with his navy. Bigger problem: it was winter, the most dangerous time to sail. So Caesar did what Caesar does, the insane move. He loaded 7 legions onto ships and sailed in the middle of winter storms before Pompey's admirals expected anyone to move. By the time Pompey's navy realized what was happening, Caesar was already in Greece. Both armies raced to a supply hub called Dyrrhachium. Pompey won the race and set up camp. Caesar arrived shortly after and did something that sounds impossible. Even though Pompey had twice as many soldiers, Caesar built a wall around Pompey's entire camp. Miles and miles of fortifications, walls, towers, trenches, the smaller army surrounding the larger one. For months, this siege continued. Caesar's men were starving, making bread from roots because they had so little grain. Then Pompey struck back. Some of Caesar's Gallic allies deserted and told Pompey exactly where the walls were weakest. Pompey launched a massive coordinated attack. The fighting was ferocious. Caesar's 9th Legion was almost destroyed. Caesar himself rushed to the fighting and grabbed a fleeing soldier's standard to rally the men. Pompey's forces broke through. The siege was broken. Caesar lost nearly 1,000 men. Everyone thought Caesar was finished. But Pompey made a fatal mistake. Instead of pursuing Caesar's retreating army and finishing him off, He hesitated, afraid it was a trap. He let Caesar escape. Drop a comment. Did Pompey blow his chance to win the war right there? Or was he being smart? Both armies regrouped and raced to link up with their scattered reinforcements. Finally, in August 48 BC, they met near a town called Pharsalus in central Greece. The numbers were shocking. Pompey, 47,000 infantry plus 7,000 cavalry. Caesar, 22,000 infantry plus 1,000 cavalry. Pompey had double the soldiers and 7 times the cavalry. Pompey's officers were so confident they were already arguing about who would get Caesar's property after they won. Who would be consul? Who would be high priest? They thought victory was certain. Pompey's battle plan was perfect. His infantry would hold Caesar's veterans in place while his massive cavalry force swept around the flank, destroyed Caesar's tiny cavalry, and attacked Caesar's legions from behind. It was exactly what Alexander the Great would have done, and it should have worked. But Caesar saw it coming. He did something brilliant. He secretly took 3,000 of his best infantry from his rear lines, armed them with spears, and formed them into a hidden fourth line behind his cavalry. These weren't just any soldiers, these were veterans who had conquered Gaul. August 9, 48 BC, the battle began. Caesar's infantry charged Pompey's center. The fighting was brutal, swords clashing, shields breaking, men screaming, nobody giving ground. Then Pompey's 7,000 cavalry charged Caesar's 1,000 horsemen. Exactly as planned, Caesar's cavalry started retreating. Pompey's cavalry pursued, thinking they'd won, and then Caesar's hidden fourth line of 3,000 spear-armed infantry wheeled around and charged directly into Pompey's cavalry. Pompey's horsemen were light cavalry, many of them young nobles who had never faced determined infantry. When 3,000 screaming Roman veterans came at them with spears aimed at their faces, they panicked. The entire cavalry force, 7,000 men, broke and ran. Now Caesar's infantry swung around and attacked Pompey's left flank from the side and rear. At the same moment, Caesar committed his third line, fresh troops who smashed into Pompey's exhausted front. Pompey's army was being attacked from 2 directions. The line cracked. It started on Pompey's left, where he was commanding, and spread like a disease. Men started to run. Pompey himself, seeing his army collapsing, fled the battlefield back to his camp. Within minutes, his entire army was routing. Thousands of soldiers were trapped on a hill and forced to surrender. It was over. Caesar had won one of the most decisive victories in ancient history. Casualties: Caesar, approximately 1,200 dead. Pompey, approximately 6,000 dead plus 24,000 captured. Pompey fled east with just 30 guards. He sailed to the island of Lesbos, picked up his wife and son, and headed to Egypt. Why Egypt? Because the young pharaoh, Ptolemy XIII, owed his throne to Pompey. Pompey had supported his father and guaranteed his inheritance. Pompey thought he'd find safety there. He was wrong. When Pompey's ship reached Egypt, he was met by a small rowboat with Egyptian officials and a Roman officer named Lucius Septimius, who had served under Pompey years before. Pompey's wife was worried. This reception seemed too modest, too suspicious. But Pompey was reassured seeing Septimius, a man he'd once commanded. As Pompey stepped into the boat, he quoted a line from Greek tragedy to his wife: "He who enters a tyrant's door becomes his slave, even if he enters as a free man." The boat rowed toward shore. Pompey tried to make small talk with Septimius, reminding him they were old comrades. Septimius barely responded. Then, as they neared shore, Septimius stood up and stabbed Pompey in the back. The other men joined in. Pompey the Great, 3-time consul of Rome, conqueror of the East, one of history's most celebrated generals, was butchered in a small boat. They cut off his head and threw his body into the sea. Why did they kill him? Ptolemy's advisors thought Caesar was going to win the war, and they wanted to win favor with Caesar by killing his enemy. When Caesar arrived in Egypt a few days later, they presented him with Pompey's severed head, thinking he'd be pleased. Caesar turned away in disgust and reportedly wept. Despite being enemies, Caesar and Pompey had once been allies, friends, family through marriage. Pompey had been one of Rome's greatest heroes. Caesar may have needed to defeat him, but he never wanted to see him murdered like a common criminal. This moment reveals something crucial about Caesar. Yes, he was ambitious. Yes, he wanted power. But he wasn't a monster. He respected worthy opponents, showed mercy when possible, wept for a fallen enemy who'd once been a friend. The Battle of Pharsalus was the turning point, but it wasn't the end. Many of Pompey's supporters fled to North Africa to continue fighting. Cato gathered more legions. Pompey's sons, Cneius and Sextus, justice, kept resisting. Caesar would spend the next 3 years hunting down the remnants of Pompey's faction across the Mediterranean. More battles, more bloodshed, more Romans killing Romans. The civil war that started at the Rubicon would ultimately kill an estimated 200,000 to 300,000 people, and that's a conservative estimate. Entire cities were destroyed, families torn apart. The Roman Republic, which had stood for almost 500 years, was dead. In its place would rise something new, the Roman Empire. And Caesar, he'd become dictator for life. But there was a price for that too, because among the prisoners Caesar had pardoned after Pharsalus was a young man named Marcus Junius Brutus. Caesar had a special affection for Brutus. He was the son of Caesar's longtime mistress. Caesar welcomed him warmly and forgave him completely. Remember that name, Brutus, because on March 15, 44 BC, the Ides of March, Brutus would be one of the men who stabbed Caesar 23 times in the Roman Senate. The man Caesar showed mercy would deliver the killing blow, and Caesar's last words, according to some sources, were directed at Brutus, Kai su, teknon, you too, child. Here's what nobody tells you about the great Roman Civil War. It wasn't really about Caesar versus Pompey. It was about a broken system that forced good men to become enemies. The Roman Republic had become so corrupt, so dysfunctional, so controlled by a wealthy elite who refused to compromise, that it couldn't survive. Caesar and Pompey were symptoms, not causes. The Senate's refusal to negotiate with Caesar didn't prevent a dictatorship, it guaranteed one. By forcing Caesar to choose between death and rebellion, they created the very tyrant they feared. And here's the lesson that matters today: when political systems become so polarized that compromise is impossible, when leaders care more about destroying their opponents than serving their people, when friendship, family, and shared history can't overcome the hunger for power, societies collapse. Rome's civil war killed hundreds of thousands, ended a republic that had lasted 5 centuries, and ushered in an age of emperors that would last another 500 years. All because 2 powerful men couldn't find a way to share power peacefully. All because politicians refused to compromise. All because personal ambition became more important than the common good. Sound familiar? If you watched this entire video, you just spent 25 minutes learning a story that most people will never fully understand. You now know more about the fall of the Roman Republic than 95% of people on Earth. So here's what I need you to do. First, destroy that like button right now. Seriously, this video took weeks of research, and that like helps it reach more people who love history like you do. Second, subscribe and turn on all notifications because we're making more deep dive history documentaries like this, and you don't want to miss them. Third, and this is the most important one, I want to hear from you in the comments. Answer this question: knowing everything you learned today, was Caesar right to cross the Rubicon, or should he have disbanded his army and faced trial? Was he defending himself against a corrupt Senate, or was he just power hungry? There's no simple answer, and I genuinely want to know what you think. Also, are you Team Caesar or Team Pompey? Drop your answer below. Fourth, if this story fascinated you, if you learned something new, if you see parallels to modern politics and power struggles, share this video with someone who loves history or needs to understand how power and ambition can collide with devastating consequences. Finally, we're creating a full series on Caesar's life, covering his time in Egypt with Cleopatra, his final campaigns in Africa and Spain, and ultimately the conspiracy that ended his life on the Ides of March. If you want that series, comment "More Caesar" right now so I know you're interested. The Great Roman Civil War wasn't just ancient history, it's a warning. It shows us what happens when political systems become too corrupt to function, leaders refuse to compromise, personal ambition trumps the common good, and when friendship, loyalty, and shared history aren't enough to prevent catastrophe. The lessons from this ancient war are still relevant today. Power corrupts, ambition blinds, compromise is hard but necessary, and sometimes the greatest friendships become the most bitter rivalries. Thank you for watching this all the way to the end. Your support means everything. Hit that subscribe button, destroy that like button, drop your comment, and I'll see you in the next episode where we finish Caesar's story. Until then, stay curious, keep learning, and never stop asking questions about history, because the past has so much to teach us about the present.